Sorry, this was the best we could do. If anybody wants to chime in and let me know if the sound is good or not. We just had a construction crew start next door with a giant generator, and I don't know if you can hear that on this mic or not. We're going to start just by doing a quick review of what's coming up. We have a seminar coming up starting, I think it's next Friday night. We have 2 hours Friday night and then Saturday, Sunday. That is our Staff Mace Club seminar in Bellingham, Washington. If there's some last minute tickets, I think there's one slot left open or something like that. If people want to get in on that, I'm going to send out an email about that later on. If you live in the western part of the United States or something, or if you can pop into Bellingham, Washington, it's going to be fun. We have a bunch of cold steel staffs, which are polypropylene indestructible plastic, and we're going to do staff drills, mace drills, and club drills. It's a fun format to do because we get to integrate all of those ideas together. You get to see what shield casts are for. You get to see what overhead presses are for. You get to do a bunch of different stuff. Can I turn to be less backlit? No, I'm just backlit. Okay. We had a little bit, good afternoon, Steve from New Brunswick. Here's our first question. Here we go, starting off strong. How do you deal with reaching high reps with light weights during the heat in the summer? You sweat a lot. You can tell I'm sweating right now. I just had a couple of minutes, so I ran out and did some kettlebelling, and it is really hot where I'm at right now, and I'm probably going to be sweating for the next 45 minutes because of it. The main thing is keeping your hands dry. If you can keep your hands dry, you can continue to kettlebell. If your hands get wet from sweat, then that is a problem. We've talked about some of those things in the past. Sweat guards on your wrist from keeping the sweat from running down your hand into the bell. But yeah, I puddle. When I work out in the summer, I have to move a couple of steps every couple of minutes. Otherwise, there's so much sweat under my feet that I lose traction and I can't push off effectively anymore. So if you're watching me kettlebell in the summer, you'll see every minute or two I take a step some direction, and I'm always looking for dry ground underneath my bare sweaty feet, which is gross, but that's what happens. I was training outside today. Just got a fist full of everything, face full of everything out there. There's construction going on and all kinds of other things, and I've been in the shop all week, so I've just been inhaling. But I kettlebell because that helps me get all of that stuff out of my body. So like my workout today was a light workout. I just went and did 7 minutes of 360s with the 25-pound mace. Focused on nasal breathing to try and drive all this stuff from welding and all this metal stuff out of my head. So that was the warm-up, and then I just did a very quick light workout, I think 21K. I don't remember what the kettlebell set at. No, they shut off the generator. They shut off the generator next door. Hopefully it stays off. And I just did swing, clean, jerk, and I did 30-30, 20-20, 10-10. Super short, super easy workout, just meant to make you breathe and just meant to make you sweat. Fun stuff in the summer, but the most important thing is keeping your hands dry and finding a place that you're not going to slip. The hot weather, the cold weather, I try not to avoid those things because those are things that I think that we should adapt to. So if it's cold, if it's not so cold that I can't hold on to the kettlebell, did I say that right? Then I'll go kettlebell outside, like all the way down to like maybe 40, 35 degrees. You get below that, your hand starts to freeze to the bell. But in the hot weather, I try to keep my kettlebell in the shade until I go out. If you leave your kettlebell outside in 100-degree heat in direct sunlight, it gets too hot to hold really quick. So you just got to leave it in the shade for 10 to 20 minutes ahead of time so you can actually hold on to it. Once it's moving and you're doing hand changes, it doesn't get hot. Here we go. Nishant Singh. Can you make a detailed walking video expanding on the 90, 180, 270, 360 idea? I could make 1,000 of those videos. The question is, how do I limit those videos into a usable format? Martial arts are based on those turns, all martial arts, and I could pull from the martial arts that I'm very familiar with, Aikido, Aikido Jutsu, or Aikijutsu, Jiu-Jitsu, and all of those stepping patterns in Kung Fu. One of my favorite stepping patterns comes from a 4-step pattern that we used to use when working on Aikijutsu throwing techniques, where you had 4 people around you, and it was somebody in front, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, 360, and then reverse stepping patterns. And then every movement had its own stepping pattern to step into the technique. We can expand on that idea forever, but somebody's got to give me some constraints on how we want to do it. I'm going to sneeze. I'm trying to get this stuff from the shop out of my head. I am helping my buddy build a new special effects trailer, so it's been a lot of chopping metal on the bandsaw and welding this week, and that stuff just kills me. I sneeze like crazy in his shop. I would love to make his shop cleaner, but the forced air system in there can't keep up with the amount of work we do. So yes, Nishant Singh. We could make just like 90, 180, 270, 360 stepping vids with just like mace or club. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Maybe we'll do that, or we'll do it with kettlebells. I did a workup of it with kettlebells a while back with stepping, rotating cleans and stuff for jiu-jitsu, but I never posted it because I just didn't think the idea was clear enough yet, and I wanted to go back and work on it again. So maybe this is me realizing I should go back and work on that. Jesse Lavercombe. Threw out the back on Sunday. Ruptured L5 S1 disc 5 years ago and was immobile for a few days, but now feeling like myself again. Okay, I think that's a statement, not a question. Basement gym guy. Have you tried the Havoc Triads or Kabuki Q-Bells yet? If so, what are your thoughts? I have not. I have not heard of those. One moment, guys. I gotta get some of this metal out of my face. Sorry, guys. I know this is gross, but I'm gonna be like this for like 3 days after being in the shop welding and cutting like that. So it's either skip the live or just have to deal with it. I have not heard of the Havoc Triads or the Kabuki Q-Bells yet, but I will look them up. They have interesting names, but sometimes that makes me concerned when somebody names something fancy like that they're really into marketing, and maybe it might not be the best thought out product, but that's just my assumption on the name. Or it could be absolutely awesome and super cool based on the name. Q-Bells. Kyu, Q, which is very Kabuki Q-Bells, implies Japanese origin or Japanese martial origin for the equipment. So I will look those up. Good evening. From Cleefy, random questions. Broke his ribs. What would you suggest for the recovery? You broke your ribs? Like, A, how many? B, how bad? I would suggest extremely light club swinging after you've done all of your mobility in your rehab. Broken ribs are a nightmare because they just make everything awful. But oftentimes when people break their ribs, they lock up quite a bit, and people don't restore the movement. That is the point of something like clubs and mace or fancy club swinging, is to help people restore that movement of the ribs. People in Western exercise science don't think of the ribs moving that much the same way that they might in, say, Chinese internal martial arts, where every arm movement or leg movement has a corresponding rib movement, which is then associated with an internal organ. And they use certain things, like I talk about this a lot, Tai Chi, Bagua, Jingyi, Golden Melon Hammer, all these other Bagua sword practices are meant to help people learn to expand and contract their rib cage again, because it's kind of a foundational thing, and once it goes away and your rib cage blocks up and it doesn't move well anymore, then you don't breathe well anymore, you don't rotate well anymore. So I would say starting with light clubs and restoring that movement over time, trying to just lower the pain level. But it has to be managed by pain with broken ribs. If they're severely broken and they're going to stab you in the lung, then obviously you're not doing anything for a while. But after they have knitted together so much and your doctor approves you for movement, it would be something like fancy Indian club swinging or mace swinging. Dmitry Andreev. Dmitry Andreev. How do you train for long hikes? Kettlebell. Long hikes, are you talking like backpacking, like backcountry? Single and double kettlebell alternating days. Double kettlebell because you need to build up your posterior hamstring strength. Depending on the weight of your pack, like an ultralight guy could be in the 35 to 40 pound range. So you would still want to be using at least a 53-pound kettlebell in order to train. You would like to train above the weight of your pack. And that's why double kettlebells tend to be there for people who are going on long hikes. If they're running like a 70-pound pack, then they need to be doing double kettlebells so that they can, in that double 20 range, so they can get up into that 88-pound equivalent so that they can start working on their muscular endurance with that much load. I always tell people the things you need to do are build your general physical preparedness for something like hiking, which is kettlebells, crossbody stabilization, hamstring strength, everything is there. And then either hiking with a pack or, VersaClimber, mountain climber. VersaClimber is a little bit more time efficient, but learning to actually hike with your pack is very, very, very important. So I tell people to start going out and hiking or walking for time. Start with 5 minutes away from the house, 5 minutes back. Start without all the stuff in your backpack, but then I have people add a minute to the walk every day and start putting all their gear in the bag so that they actually can do the shakedown of how the bag sits on their back. Long distance hiking, if you haven't done a shakedown, is a nightmare. So you should definitely be doing your shakedown workouts where you put everything you need in your pack and and every time you go do it, you put all your gear in the bag, you go for your hike, you come back, you take everything out. And then the next time you do it again because you're going to get way better and the pack's going to get more comfortable as you adjust everything inside the bag. I think that's pretty important, especially if you're doing distance on long hikes. Seth Fajirstad. I'm going to sneeze again, guys. Sorry. Ugh, never going to get this metal stuff out of my face. I wish there was a way to weld without this happening to me, but it's not in the cards for me. How do I feel about kettlebells being directed towards archery? I love it. Kettlebells are archery. Depends on what kind of archery. All right, I'm an archery nerd, or I used to be an archery nerd, but I was always a traditional American archery nerd. What that means is that I shot something like a longbow. I shot bow in my left hand, arrow on the left side with a 45-degree cant in the bow with 3 fingers, 1 finger above, 2 finger below. That is the old, like, classic American Fred Bear archery style of shooting, shooting traditional wooden arrows and handmade tips and everything like that. But it was mostly for static still hunting. It's not like a form of combat archery. And I did shoot from back quiver for the most part because hunting in the eastern woodlands, that was the easiest way for me to do it. It was a quiver that was stabilized across the chest for moving fast, that you could also swing under your arm for going through heavy brush. I think kettlebells are amazing for archery. I mean, absolutely amazing. I think kettlebells are good for everything, but archery has a very specific type of rotation of the core, the heavier the draw of the bow gets. When you start building up towards something like English longbow and you start getting your weight of your longbow up higher and higher, if you get up towards 80 pounds, I did shoot 80 pounds for a very short period of time, but it just takes a lot to maintain that. And if you don't have the schedule where you're going to go out and shoot 3 quivers of arrows every day because you don't have a location to do it, then I don't think 80 pounds is like a sustainable thing to jump back into. The bows that I use now are light. They're in the 50, 55 pound range because you can just pick that up and shoot pretty well, and that will still take everything on the North American continent, which is kind of just like a kind of classic 45 to 55 pound draw. It's like a classic American useful bow pull weight. But there's all these other awesome types of archery. You have different types of grips, all from different types of mounted archery. I would really love to get into mounted archery. There's a place called Can-Am Nightmares up north of the border in Vancouver that I want to go train with. I've been trying to get up there for 2 years to train with them. They're actually, that team, Can-Am Nightmares, is actually riding the Mongolian Derby right now. But I was supposed to be support team for that, so I should be in Mongolia right now. But I can't be because they won't let anybody. They got rid of support teams because of COVID. I don't know how that helps anybody, seeing as how they're in the Mongolian steppe, 1,000 miles away from anything. I don't think it's really a big COVID danger, but apparently no support teams this year. So my friends are there right now, but they do a bunch of different types of mounted horse archery, and there's different types of grips there, but there's a lot of grip and rotation and all kinds of fun stuff. So yes, kettlebells for archery, heavy clubs. If you do your archery combined with something like tomahawk throwing, then once again, heavy clubs and mills are the basis of your pattern for all of your throwing patterns. For tomahawk throwing, archery, amazing. You're going to end up doing a lot of rows, deadlift to row, deadlift row clean. And what you end up doing with your kettlebells, if you want to lean it towards archery, is putting a lot of pauses and different types of rows in there and holding that retraction at the top for like 2 or 3 seconds, just to kind of trick the muscles into doing more what you want them to do. I don't think that was a great answer, but yes, I like kettlebells for archery. Withered Serenity, great name, from 1205. Mark, between heavy clubs, kettlebell marathoning, and sandbags, I'm finding my hands and elbows feeling beat up and having a lot of interference between the workouts. Is this a common problem? Yes. That's why in the beginning, the way that I organize training is heavy clubs are like on a 30-30 cycle, right? 30 seconds of work, 30 seconds of break. And we cycle a bunch of different movement patterns. And that is specifically to help people's elbows not get trashed. If you were to just pick one exercise and go for an extremely long period of time in the beginning, then people tend to wear out their elbows. The way that I tend to organize training is with like small sets and going up in weight first before something like marathoning. So I don't know your history on how you're getting into marathoning, what your previous training is. But usually if people are doing marathoning, then they go back to something like 30-30 with heavy clubs so that you're not keeping your elbow under sustained load with clubbing. And then if you're doing long clubs, then you tend to go back to shorter kettlebell sets, back towards hardstyle pure strength training. It takes a long time for people to be able to do marathon times with both clubs and kettlebells in the same cycles without trashing their arms, especially if they're pushing them all up in weight or for longer periods of time all the time. Usually you have to pick one thing to be the heavy, and the other thing is the maintenance. So if you're doing marathoning, that might be your heavy because it's the long-term load. So you would like to counterbalance that with short load for something like clubbing. And then the opposite is true. Sandbagging, I don't think you should be getting terrible elbow stuff from sandbags because you should be pulling off the ground with straight arms, but that could be just a technique issue or it's just a cumulative effect. So for the most part, if you're trying to do marathoning and all that other stuff, make the other one somewhere intermediate to heavyweight but shorter sets. Turn it back into strength training for the other thing. And that helps people just balance out the load on the elbows quite a bit. Jeff Stifler, great name. All those from the late 90s know that. Working through your overweight decondition program and loving it. Thank you. Way to go, Jeff. After clean and press and deck box squat, what are the next 2 kettlebell exercises you recommend? I recommend you do clean and press, Jeff, until you get to 32K. So your clean in your press doesn't just stop at like 12, 15, 16K. Like that should get pushed up. That is our deconditioned program ideas are meant to help people start reconditioning with a very lightweight and a simple way, but you're meant to ramp that up. The single arm club stuff, you're not supposed to really stop that until you get to, say, 25 pounds for single arm club. And your deck squat, once again, that too can go up into the 32K range. I find deck squats tend to get really rough on people after 32K because they have a hard time, the hand has a hard time actually sustaining load above that. But yes, so you're working on your clean and press and your deck squats. Then you also need to work on your clubs. If you have your clean and presses going up in weight, then you can start to have a light kettlebell day where you can start to work on more complex things, like Turkish get-up mastery. But depending on your body size, Turkish get-up mastery might have to continue to get pushed, and you might have to do two-handed club, the Strong and Fit Mill squat program, as usual, helicopters in LA, and your single arm club stuff. If you can't get into the Turkish get-up stuff yet. Turkish get-up is very much based on size, and if you still are bigger than you would like to be, and it makes something like Turkish get-up mastery very hard in the beginning, then you stick with the standing exercises. You could go to something like snatch, but I tell people not to go to something like snatch until, like, I used to just put people into snatch in the beginning 15 years ago because that was the greatest kettlebell exercise with the most calorie burn and everything. But I've changed that over time, and I put people through a lot more clean and press training before snatch. So they need to be at least, I think 8K up from whatever they're going to snatch with. They need to be clean and pressing maybe 4 to 8K above that, just to make sure they have the correct structure. Because something like snatch has way more force on the way down because the kettlebell is falling twice as far as it does from the clean position. So we want people to overtrain with clean and press so that their hand is in the right spot, so that they get stronger, so that they can eventually move to something like snatch training or their single arm club training. Dave McMillan, do you think we will get more Concept 2 rower videos, or how best should we incorporate those into our program? Yes, I just haven't been near my rower. My rower's over at Gambate Fitness, and Gambate Fitness was closed all last week. That's why I started doing a bunch of shop stuff with my friend, because I wanted to do a bunch of videos in Gambate, but they got booked out for some film shoot or some TV show shoot or something. So I haven't been in there since I've been back in LA. Normally I'm in there every day when I'm in LA. But I'm going to try to get back today because today's the first day I'm back in town and it's open. But yeah, we would like to make more Concept 2 rower videos. Really just the intro is the most important part. If you do kettlebells and clubs, then you will be way better at rowing on accident. And there are a lot of very people who work on perfect rowing technique, and I work on adequate rowing technique. But for the most part, I just put rowing in, unless I'm doing a Gambate workout where it's integrated into weightlifting or something. For the most part, I separate my stuff out. I separate my clubs from my kettlebells. Now I separate rowing from kettlebells. I separate it from everything else, and I just do something like a workout of the day or small sets. There's a whole published series of small workouts that you can do on the Concept 2 site, and you can track your numbers for those. If you have a PM5, then it will Bluetooth to your phone and go to the Concept 2 app, and it will track all your data for that, which is super, super, super cool. But I tend to, when I had my rower in my studio, I would wake up and row in the morning. I would wake up, I would do a little bit of mace or club to wake up, get the shoulders moving, and then I would do a rowing workout early in the morning, and then I would come back and do kettlebells later on. Rowing stands alone. You can just throw it in anywhere you have time for it for the most part. It is just another Tetris block that you do. And if you have more time, then you can row longer. I never really got into more than the 25-minute rowing workouts because it just becomes a lot between kettlebells, clubbing, macing, rowing, cycling, doing martial arts, doing aerial. Rowing just ended up being a nice small block that you could throw in 2 to 3 times a week when you had time in between clients or whatever. I really do like the Concept 2 rower. I think that is the best rower that has ever been made. I think the PM5 is amazing. The PM3, the PM4, and the PM5 are all great. The ones older than that are so old you won't even find them anymore. I did find one in Scotland, like a PM1. It's crazy. The thing's from like 1982 or something. It did not work well. Nobody had serviced it in years. It was in a hotel gym, a fancy hotel gym where they just put it in there and you couldn't use it because it was such trash. But it was a cool machine. You often talk about feet direction and foot posture. Thoughts on barefoot zero drop shoes? This is from Eric Olafson at 1206. Man, I'm really behind on my questions here. Pardon me, guys. I'm going to be breathing out that shop gunk forever. Zero drop shoes. Yes, buy them, wear them all the time. I have cheap zero drop shoes, Feiways. If you go back through my videos, you will find Feiways, Feiue, Feiway shoes. They're the classic Kung Fu training shoe. It's like the Chinese national shoe. They're super cheap. And they were my first experience with what I would consider to be like a zero drop shoe. They're just a thin layer of rubber, and they're worn by martial artists all over the world. Specifically, if you look at the Shaolin Temple, everybody's wearing Feiway shoes. More fancy zero drop shoes like Zeros, Xero, I believe, sirens, are absolutely fantastic. I love a wide toe box shoe. My favorite boots are these, the Mini Mills, the Belleville Mini Mill. And they have 2 versions of this. They have a step down with a small drop, and then they have, I believe this one is the actual zero drop. These boots do not look cool at all, but man, are they comfortable. They are the most comfortable shoe I have ever worn, and mine are completely annihilated because I've dragged them everywhere in every environment. I was just wearing them yesterday out in Landers, which is out by Joshua Tree in the desert, working on some stuff. And, 110 degrees out there. Those boots with wool darn tough socks are so comfortable. It's crazy. I do talk a lot about foot posture because I think that is something that gets left out in gym training. People wear very fancy shoes, and then they want to know why their back hurts. The first thing, if somebody tells me they have back pain, the first thing I do is look at their feet. I'm so weird. I watch people's feet as they walk through like theaters or whatever. And it's just something my eye does after being a trainer for years and years and years. I look at an entire crowd of people, and I can tell people who are in pain just by their foot posture. If people are turned out or their ankles are rolled in or collapsed, you see this all the time, then you should take the shoes away and work on your foot, work on your feet. Just make them do what they're supposed to do, just in the standing position first. A lot of people try to jump directly into like a lot of fancy barefoot running or jumping patterns or stuff like this, and that is okay. But if you try to institute something like barefoot running without building up your feet first, a lot of people get hurt and then they stop and then they never do it again. So I advocate a lot for people to barefoot train with their feet pointed straight ahead if they have any type of turnout and they have any type of collapsed arch. There are people, like I do know dancers who can turn out and keep a high arch, but that is from years and years and years of dance training. If you are not a dancer and you don't have years of dance training, then point your feet straight ahead, because as you swing weights laterally, it will cause the arch of your foot to fire. And if your arch of your foot gets stronger, think of it like this part of your hand, like the thumb pad of your hand. Holding on to kettlebells makes your hand stronger. It connects all the way up through your leg. Same thing is true of your foot. When your foot is pointed straight ahead and your arch fires and you're swinging weight laterally, you'll see people's ankles move very subtly, and that's what they're supposed to do. So it's one of the first things you do for ankle rehab. And then you work on standing position, you get bit more and more and more of that, and then you build into like basic stepping and jumping patterns. But yes, train barefoot or train with zero drop shoes. Absolutely, for sure. Like, I will not even let people in my studio if they were to walk in a pair of Nikes with those stupid springs in the back. I just take them off right away. Nobody wore shoes in my studio at all, ever. I don't care. You're not wearing them. If we're going to go outside and do fight training, I will let you put on shoes, but they better be zero drop shoes. Yeah, I'm very passionate about zero drop shoes and barefoot training. I don't harp on it like a lot of people do. I think maybe I do, but I'm always harping on foot position just to get people in the correct position first instead of the barefoot aspect, the alignment of the foot so that the foot can work properly so that you can get to more sexy barefoot training. But many martial arts train barefoot, so I started training barefoot at a young age. Aikido, jiu-jitsu, all those things are barefoot martial arts, and you would train barefoot outside for a lot of that stuff. Chinese martial arts tend to wear shoes, but they wear fadeaways, which are zero drops. Yeah. So buy zero drop shoes. There's a lot of good ones on the market. I got some in Germany that were really nice, but they were really brightly colored. I have no idea what happened to those. But for the most part, I wear fadeaways or zeros, Xeros. I don't even know where my zeros are right now, but I need to get a new pair. They have a baseline model, which is so comfortable, it's absolutely bonkers. I mean, it is unbelievable. When you start to run or a CrossFit or do something in zero shoes, your whole foot changes in about 3 months. I had really good feet, and when I started wearing the Belleville mini mills everywhere, my feet changed even more. My feet got even wider. Because barefoot training was only a limited amount of time, and then I was putting on like big, heavy work boots, and it was, squeezing my feet back up. So I was constantly going back and forth between squeeze foot and open foot. Now with the Belleville mini mills, my foot can be open all the time, and it is truly awesome all the time. I love walking down the street in those shoes. Like, it's actually fun to just walk down the street. They feel so good. Dane, D-A-N-E, Dom. Aloha, Mark. Aloha. Hello, our Hawaiian peoples. Any specific kettlebell exercises that will help me with my flexibility? I've never been able to touch my toes, and my hip flexors are extremely tight. I have one 40-pound kettlebell, if that helps. Yes. Start with all your basics of kettlebelling, of course. You can't build specific adaptation without general adaptation first. So, your swings, your clean and press, your Turkish get-up mastery, your clubs, all that stuff will make your hamstrings start to work and rotate properly. At the end of every workout, you will start with, say, 30 seconds of forward fold. Tailbone, legs straight, tailbone against the wall, legs perfectly straight, forward fold. Build up to you can do the forward fold, just hanging body weight for at least 3 minutes. When you've gotten to that point, then you can start introducing small weights. Probably not the 40-pound kettlebell in the beginning. Find something else, anything with any amount of weight, a jug of water, and then start holding that in your hands when you're doing your 3 minutes of forward fold. Some weight that will pull down and drag on your body to provide an outside force to start to convince your muscles to do something different. And then this builds into an exercise we call the Jefferson curl, where you would start increasing the weight of the thing that you're holding during your forward fold till you get up to maybe the 40-pound weight of your kettlebell. And at that point, it should be dragging you really far down. And then you want to just start standing up with it. It is a straight leg deadlift. This is not something I recommend for normal people to do without doing all the other training first. You need to do all the other prep stuff first. If you have bad flexibility, then you need to do all your basics. You definitely need to do all of your forward folds. You need to do your plow stretch of some type. You need to do your sphinx, extend, do the opposite of the forward fold. And then that builds into something that we call a Jefferson curl, where we start doing essentially straight leg, straight arm hang deadlifts with light weights. You're not going to start with that 40-pound kettlebell. You're going to start with something like a can of soup or a jug of water, and you're going to do 5 sets of 5 reps. You're going to do 4 seconds down, pause for 2 to 3 seconds at the bottom, 2 seconds up, stop. The goal is to have straight legs. This is very stressful for people on the lower back if they have not done the prep work. If they have not done the prep work, you should not do this idea at all. But then you build up towards 5 sets of 5 with that Jefferson curl, and then you start taking the weight up. That is an old circus idea, which I stole from somebody, a guy up at the Vancouver Circus School. And that guy was like one of the best hand balancers in the world. And he, would bend forward, put one hand flat on the ground, and then pull straight up. And he said the Jefferson curl is one of the main exercises that he did for that. And I did it with him for several months. Some people don't like the way I do Jefferson curls. I got it from some Eastern European guy. I don't know. Everybody does stuff differently on different parts of the world. But the Jefferson curl is one of the goals to increase the flexibility of your hamstrings. But you have to do the prep work, otherwise it will trash you and you will not like it. Zero Prios shoes, I believe they're called. Senile Canuck. I can never tell if you guys' names are joke names until I say them aloud. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. But yeah, the Zero Prius, I believe, is the model of Zero shoe I'm talking about. The Prio, this guy's calling it a Prio or Prios. P-R-I-O or P-R-I-O-S, Prios. Yeah, I can't wear regular sneakers anymore since wearing something like zero drop shoes. I find them suffocating. They just make me absolutely bonkers. I bought a pair of Nikes once because I was absolutely desperate. I was in New York and I had forgotten my fadeaways, and I couldn't get down to Chinatown to buy some fadeaways. So I walked across the street into some shoe shop and I bought a pair of whatever Nike CrossFit shoe was, and I wore them for one day and I threw them away. They were so awful. I could not wear them. It was the biggest waste of money I've ever had in my life, and it haunts me to this day. Buy zero drop shoes. Don't buy any of this other trash. Edward started a 2-hand heavy club program. That's our male squat program from BJJ Fanatics or Strong and Fit, and the intermediate kettlebell program last week. Also doing BJJ 6 times a week. Feels super nice. However, my forearms are trashed. Any tips? Or just wait and it will pass? Yes, your forearms are probably going to be trashed. The 2-handed club stuff is very hard in the beginning. The intermediate kettlebell program is also very hard. There's a lot of hand changes. You will be doing a lot of seal stretches. You should definitely be doing seal stretch after BJJ anyway. So think a seal stretch as a sphinx stretch, which turns into an up dog stretch. An up dog stretch, when you turn your hands around and point your fingers backwards towards your toes, is a seal stretch. And you should be doing that for probably at least 2 minutes at the end of every workout. BJJ guys are always in this closed pack pulling position because they're wrestling and they're contending, and they're very rarely do they want to end up in full joint extension in their sport, because it means that they're in an arm bar, which is bad. Sorry, guys. So they tend to maintain a lot of tension in their elbow, or what do we call this? The triple warmer aspect here from grabbing gis and dragging on things, and then that can get exacerbated by the clubs and the kettlebells. So you need to be putting in seal stretch every day, 2 minutes minimum. And then there is an elbow locust stretch. I think I have 3 videos on that in my stretching series of playlist. I did, I think, 3 versions of it. Lying down on the ground, putting your elbow underneath your belly button, palm facing the ground, fingers splayed wide, and moving your body weight over the elbow to stretch out your elbow. Those are the 2 stretches you can do, and there are probably 2 or 3 versions of each one of those stretch, and you should cycle them every day. And you should put them in at the end of your BJJ practice. The end of your BJJ practice, you should definitely be doing a sphinx, a forward fold, Probably a plow, which is the hardcore version of a forward fold, because you're always in a plow in BJJ. Like, that's literally guys stacking you and trying to crush you to make you submit. The better you are at plow, the better you are at all wrestling arts. And then a shin box arm thread through to rotate the spine, the upper body away from the hips. Because once again, that's what people are trying to do to you in BJJ. They're trying to rip you apart that way. And then the forearm stretch, the seal and the single arm locust probably are the best ones. They're the easiest to learn. And there's a bunch of versions of those exercises, and you should do them every day. If you're training that much and doing BJJ 6 days a week, you should put in 20 to 30 minutes of cool down every day. If you're young, you'll get away with it for a couple of years, but it'll start to really tear on you after a couple of years of not doing the stretching. Nobody likes to do the stretching part, but everybody should do the stretching part. Isaac Narell is a professional musician who started strength training a few years ago. Keep hitting setbacks. First with kettlebell, lower back pain on my left side. Clubs, right trap knots. Any tips? Isaac, I instantly wonder what kind of professional musician you are, because you sound like a violinist from your injury series. Right trap knots. Right trap knots. Yeah. Yeah, lighter weight and more balance. And you're going to have to counteract if you're a professional musician. Professional musicians are extremely adapted to one specific position. So you would like to write yourself a cool down program that is specific to the instruments that you're playing the most. Does that mean you're a professional studio musician, or does that mean you're a classical musician in an orchestra? Each one will have a slightly different cool down strategy at the end of your day, because musicians tend to always be facing one way. Like, just imagine, like, guitarists are always twisted one way with their hands in one position, holding load in a certain way. So they become perfectly adapted and they become masters of the thing, but then they need to counteract that thing in their cool down stretch. So whatever tension you're doing, you need to go the exact opposite way in your cool down and hold for 2 to 3 minutes. Professional musicians are interesting ones because it can be very interesting to design their cool down strategy based on their instruments. It's just a fun thing as a trainer to do, to look at something like a violinist and write a program to counteract that or to help them get better at it. But musicians tend to be asymmetrical, like tennis players. Tennis players have one super good arm and their other arm is kind of like doesn't do much and it's not super coordinated. Tennis players tend to have one foot that turns out really hardcore from that power stroke on the strong side. So like when you're training a tennis player, like one of the things you have to do is get that 1 foot straight ahead in weightlifting, because they'll try to do the whole thing like that. Musicians are the same way. They'll try to turn whatever way their instrument causes them to be. And some are worse than others. Violin tends to be a little bit rough because they always have the shoulder lift and the head pad. There's an idea that, like, Kurt Cobain, I believe, played guitar left-handed, and the rotation is what made him such a depressed person who was on drugs to counteract the pain of being very, very good at the thing he did. All that pain obviously led to great Nirvana music, but it was obviously a great tragedy for him in the long run. But musicians do become hyper-specialized, and it does put people in a lot of pain. So people tend to have to go back down to lighter weights than they think that they need, because they tend not to be able to do the strength training part first. They have to do the mobility restoration part first so that they can survive strength training. So you might have to go down in weight and go back to, say, your single arm clubs, work on those feet, look in the mirror and see if everything is the same on each side or not, and run a couple of extra cycles at a lighter weight than you need in order to restore the movement so you can go up in weight without getting hurt. That was an interesting one. Musicians, I haven't talked to any professional musicians in a long time. I haven't trained any in a long time, but it is very interesting to do, to train people with very specific musical patterns. They also think totally differently. It's very hard to get them to count in tens or fives or tens because they always want to do fours and eights. So I have tried that before. It just tends not to work very well. The math is weird, but musicians have weird math and they can do it in their head backwards. So Richard Braithor, Rich Braithor. Nutrition question. You mentioned red meat and veggies. What about other forms of protein? Fish, chicken, eggs, soy, etc. Why or why not? I'm a red meat dude. I am of the, how do I say this? I am of the position that historically the evolution of mankind comes from eating meat, specifically red meat, because it was one of the things that had a high enough calorie content and a high enough fat content that it changed the way our evolution worked, or that's the theory that I follow. I believe that we were meat eaters, red meat eaters before everything else. Veggies and red meat eaters. And what people will argue with me all day on that, and that's fine. We can all argue about this all the time. But I am a big fan of the idea that red meat comes in a large enough package that it allowed civilization to exist or to start. If you go back to your text from the Middle East and the origins of Judeo-Christian history and everything, what do we have a lot of? We have a lot of goats and sheep. Goats and sheep instead of cattle. And goats and sheep instead of cattle was because lack of refrigeration, although there was a lot of cattle in that area in that time, because cattle is one of those fundamental things of civilization. But it was food that stayed fresh on the hoof. I don't know if anybody's ever heard that phrase. If you're not a farmer, fresh on the hoof. And goats and sheep were small, so you could eat a goat or a sheep out of the flock. You still maintained a big enough breeding population that you could restore the food that you had just eaten in a brief period of time, but then that food from one sheep would feed a large group of people for several days, which allowed people to begin specialization of different types of thought patterns. Like, I am a trainer. I am a highly specialized form of intellectual idea in all of human history. Like, we just pay people to like sit around and think about how to make people healthier and move better. That has happened a lot of times in history, but in order to do that, you have to have a food surplus. In order to have a food surplus, I believe that red meat is the thing in all of human history that does that better than everything else. I love eggs. I think eggs are one of those great things. I don't talk about eggs a lot because it's just hard for people to get good eggs, for the most part. Like, when my family lives out in Colorado, and they just have free-range chickens. And so there's fresh eggs every day. And so I will sit down and eat 6 to 12 of those fresh, beautiful eggs because those chickens don't eat feed. They are let out every day. After the sun comes up, you just open the door of the chicken coop. The chickens come out. And this is where you really realize that chickens are raptors and that they're just tiny velociraptors. And they will pack hunt through the desert fields out there. It's a high desert out there. And there used to be, before we got the chickens, there were these like ground squirrels and voles all the way up to the edge of the house. And they're a problem because they create soft spots and horses can put their foot through it. And it's always been a thing. Like, groundhogs and ground squirrels are a thing. But chickens pack hunt. And you don't know this if you've never seen chickens in a really far out environment. But when we started doing free range chickens like that, you would open the door and they would go out and they'd spend all day, and they would go as a pack, like a school of fish, through the fields. And they eventually ate all of the ground squirrels within 400 yards of the house. And it made the ground much better. But the eggs from those chickens don't look like eggs that you get in the city. They are such deep golden color, and they're so full of nutrition that it's amazing. So I think red meat is probably the thing that I advocate for. After that is eggs. After that is chicken, but I didn't grow up around water, so I'm not really a fish guy. I just don't know much about fish. We didn't fish. We lived in the woods and in fields, so we hunted red meat. So I talk a lot about red meat a lot. I think that there's a lot of historical reasons why red meat is really good. I think that red meat is still probably one of the better things that you can eat, especially if you're having some type of health issues related to food intake. And a lot of, I think, modern health issues are related to food intake. People do really well on red meat and vegetables. They tend to get thinner, they get happier, they work better. There's a lot of other stuff out there, like things I don't like. I don't like soy. I don't think you should be eating soy if at all possible. Yeah. So I hope I answered your question about nutrition. I get a little bit long and rambly because I think about these things in weird ways. But I think red meat is the most important thing in the modern diet or in any diet from any time period. And I think that everybody does better on a red meat and vegetable diet. I don't know anybody that that's not true for, that I haven't seen that be true for. And I think that evolution supports that idea. And the development of civilization has been improved by red meat. Here's a good one. Sema Ibrahim ben Abdelaziz. Hold on, let me do that again, guys. This is a name from somewhere in the old world. Sema Ibrahim ben Abdelaziz. I'll get that better. This is a question. Here it is. Here's the start of it. It's a 3-part question. If you use kettlebells for strength training, would you do like barbell and jump 2K every time? I like the 2K jump in kettlebells because it allows you to run cycles more and get more experience and therefore get better movement patterns, therefore get everything you want out of training. In the beginning of kettlebell training, it was 16, 24, 32K. And those are big jumps. Those are 8K jumps. And that's because if you have a limited amount of time and money and space, those are the 3 best weights you can have. If you, now with the advent of adjustable competition kettlebells, you now can have 1 to 2K jumps. I think 2K jumps are really, really, really good instead of, say, an 8K jump. So instead of running a cycle at 16 and 24, running a cycle at 16, 20, 24 is better because you get a whole nother cycle of experience and therefore better technique, therefore more time to adapt, therefore more time for your joints to adapt internally. And then I think 16, 18, 20, 22, 24 is even better. So instead of having 2 cycles, 16 and 24, you now have 5 cycles. So you now have way more learning potential. I really like 2K jumps for their learning potential. The more times you go through a program, the more likely you are to internalize it and get better at it, especially if you're self-coaching. If you're self-coaching, then you need more experiments to get to the same outcome as everybody else. So yes, I love 2K jumps for strength training. Not every time. I think you need to run entire cycles at 2K jumps and then go up and repeat the cycles again. Strength training like barbells is a little bit different because the movements are much simpler. You know, back squat, bench, power clean. They're much simpler movements, so you can probably go up in weight faster, but you're not doing as many reps. They're different beasts. Barbell, strength training, same movement pattern, go up in weight, do your 5 sets of 5 or your 3 sets of 3 or whatever your math is. Kettlebells, you're really building for that intermediate weight, and you're building strength through endurance and through repetitive action. So they are slightly different things. So you can't do your 2K jump every time. You can do your 2K jump every cycle, every time you complete a movement goal set. Second part of the question from Sema Ibrahim ben Abdelaziz. I'm going to get it. Would that be good practice? Also, since heavy weights are limited at a certain point, would you give up on kettlebells for strength and switch to barbells? Yeah, if you are just trying to do pure strength training, barbells are best. Barbells are not good for movement training. There's no rotation for the most part in barbell, unless you're doing Landmine University. But now you're not doing strength training anymore. Now you're doing movement training again. So if you want to do pure strength training, if you have limited weights, then yes, use barbell. But you should also use kettlebell for your movement patterns. You could do barbell and do your deadlift, back squat, bench, deadlift 2 days a week, back squat 2 days a week, bench 2 days a week, and then have kettlebells in the middle and have it be on your bench days. Do your pure strength bench and then do Turkish get up mastery and do Turkish get up breakdowns that whole day. On your deadlift day, I would probably do deadlift and squats opposite with the kettlebells, just because I'm weird like that. And it would be like deadlift, deck squat. And your deadlift would be your pure strength, and your deck squat would be your usable range of movement. And then you would do something like your barbell front squat or back squat on one day and counter it with swings or snatches or cleans for endurance. It depends on what you define as strength. Because I'm much more interested myself in something like circular strength. I'm much more interested in mace strength than I am in deadlift strength. But that's just an experience from my life. And I find that to be much more useful in the long run than just pure strength. I find mace to be more useful. But there's a million ways you can do this. The third part of Sima Ibrahim's question. He doesn't have access to a car, but he likes training outdoors. Any backpacks or other ways for walking with or carrying kettlebells? You could do the classic farmer's carry, but that depends on how far away you're going. If you want to turn it into rucking, then find yourself an old Alice backpack frame. This U.S. military backpack frame that was used in Vietnam up through whenever they got the new Malay system in whatever it was, somewhere in the early 2000s. So there are tons of these things floating around the world, and they are very, very good, sturdy backpack frame. You need the ledge that goes on the bottom. They have a pack ledge. That thing is much, much harder to find, and it like slides in and clicks down. And you can set your kettlebell on top of that and then use trucker straps, black trucker straps, which are long rubber straps with a metal S-hook on each side. And you can then run it through the handle and strap it to the frame. And you can use that as an awesome rucking solution to carry your gear to an outdoor location. Now you're getting way more workouts in, right? If you've got a 5-10 minute walk with a kettlebell on an Alice frame and a mace in your hand, now you're going to walk there. You're going to get 10, 20, however far you're walking. Workout. There's your warm up. Then you're going to do your movement pattern stuff to work out outside. Then you're going to load it back up and you're going to walk it back home. That's a really good idea, Ibrahim. Very cool. But Alice pack frames. There's also another thing you can do with an Alice pack frame if that's not quite working. You take an Alice pack frame, you put the ledge on the bottom, you get a Rubbermaid, I think it's like a 20-quart rectangular trash can, and you band that to the Alice pack frame, and then it becomes a pack basket, and you can fill it up with stuff. The problem is you can really fill it up with a lot of heavy stuff. You don't want to get that thing more than maybe 60 or 70 pounds because it gets really hard to get on and off of your back. But yeah, the old Alice pack frame with the trash can rubber banded to it is awesome. And usually people would drill a hole in the bottom of the trash can so in case it rains or any water gets down there, stuff drains out the bottom. Yeah, Alice pack frame. Let's find another one here. We're about at an hour here. What would be the best workout to strengthen legs to prevent IT band injury, among other foot leg pain? I'm trying to increase distance running, but almost without fail I get injured. This is from Philip Ciurba. Ciurba? Ciurba. S-C-I-U-R-B-A. Ciurba. Philip Ciurba. Strengthen the legs to prevent IT band injury. IT band injury is a combination of the muscles on the outside of your legs. I mean, I would instantly, of course, say heavy club swinging in the families of movements associated with that, because as you swing weight laterally with the weight in front of you, your glute tries to fire, and as that outside glute muscle tries to fire, that runs down essentially the IT band muscle firing chain, and it crosses across the midpoint of the back, which is the stuff that you really need to be good at for long distance running. The specificity of the IT band is interesting, because what this really means is that you need to be doing a proper endurance strengthening program, which could be based on deadlift, but most likely for me it would be swings, long cycle, snatch, and all the various components of that, of series, what do we call these things? Series lifts? I'm saying this word wrong. Or we would combine weight swinging front to back to build the endurance for the hamstrings and the core, and then we would alter the number and the type of exercise each day to build up towards longer and longer time frames, building up towards that 10, 15, 20, 30-minute mark. But the IT band is interesting. That implies that something is going wrong with maybe either footfall or the rotation of the knee, and anytime that comes up in conversation, the first thing we think is lateral weight swinging to restabilize the ankle, the knee, and the hip, and the lower back, but then to build it in towards stepping patterns, and then after that, it's all kinds of stuff. That one kicked me into a whole brain thing there. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I'd have to think on that. I think the most important thing for that is to be doing your proper cool downs. Get strong enough and then counterbalance the load from the long run. So there would be a whole series of specific stretches you would need to do after you run. That's the problem with most people who are endurance athletes. They like to do the endurance part. They don't like to do the cool down part. Or at least nobody I know likes to do the cool down part. But the cool down part is the thing that's probably most likely to keep you alive, so that you can recover, so that you can go train the next day. But I wonder if there's not some type of adhesion, if you have repeated injuries in the IT band, if you haven't built up some type of adhesions somewhere in that muscle chain, maybe in the glutes, and it wouldn't be advantageous to use a 3.5-inch physio ball to crush it before running and after running for 2 to 3 minutes on each side with at least 3 positions. Flourish Caster. You've spoken about body weight and its limited viability for deconditioned overweight people. Could you speak on the potentiality of calisthenics? Is that still for deconditioned and overweight people? The problem with body weight training for overweight individuals is that they are already carrying out around weight. So it's very hard to tailor the amount of difficulty to something that they can continually get 5 to 10% or 5 to 7% better at every day while maintaining good structure. The most important things that humans do is stand up. We stand up. We're a bipedal species. We stand up, we look, we run, we swing, we throw. A lot of calisthenics involves getting up off of the ground, which is a skill you absolutely need, but you need it after you can do the standing part. So if people are deconditioned, we tend to lean people towards things like kettlebells and clubs because we can control the load. We can get them better at standing up. We can get their feet pointed straight ahead. We can try to solve a bunch of structural issues on the way so that they can get strong enough where they can go towards body weight training. Calisthenics are really just body weight training. It's just a fancy other word for body weight training. People reinvent these words all the time. So calisthenics is kind of more of a word that you might hear associated with like older military training. And the point of something like military body weight training was to train a bunch of people to follow orders, to move in unison, and you could do it anywhere. You can put 1,000 guys in a field and make them do body weight squats for an hour. It doesn't require anything. They can do it anywhere. They can do it with their pack. They can hold a pack in front of them. They can put a guy over their shoulders. But push-ups are, once again, push-ups in calisthenics. Calisthenics tends to be, as I think of that word, as things like push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, the basic things of greater skills that haven't yet been fully integrated together. Calisthenics are great. I used to do calisthenics all the time. I used to do 500 push-ups a day and 500 sit-ups and 100 pull-ups and jump rope do jumping jacks for 20 minutes or something like that. But it was really simple. The problem with calisthenics is that it never enhanced athletic attributes because it was missing a bunch of stuff from what you might consider in CrossFit, there are 10 things that you need to have in an athletic training program. And calisthenics are really good at like doing 3 of them, but then they leave out stuff like throwing pattern, accuracy, a bunch of other stuff gets left out of calisthenics training. So you can make it up in other ways. But calisthenics training and body weight training are kind of the exact same thing. I just call body weight training as opposed to kettlebell training because you're using just your body weight. But body weight training can then lead into things like armor training and all this other stuff. It's not that it's bad for deconditioned individuals. It's that you need to be prepared to survive training. The goal is to make people succeed, not to make people fail. The problem with calisthenics training is that people are likely to fail. In something like a military context, that's fine because they're trying to wash people out. They're trying to get rid of people. They're not trying to get everybody to succeed. They're trying to get somebody to fail so somebody else can succeed. Like you'll hear guys like first tier guys talk about that a lot. 1,000 guys go in for training and they're only going to keep 10 or 20 of them. So they got to make hundreds of them quit. And they do that by calisthenics training for the most part. And the calisthenics training it serves to make them strong, but it really serves to test their mental fortitude at a certain point. Or that's how it's explained to me by a lot of my military buddies. They say, well, there's a million better ways to train. We just do calisthenics because the goal is to torture us. That's a direct quote from one of my Navy SEAL friends. So you can do body weight training. You just need to make sure you're prepared first. If you're deconditioned, kettlebells and clubs are the easiest thing to do. Then do specific types of body weight training designed to help you learn things that you absolutely need to know, like getting up off the ground quickly with good technique. Calisthenics tend to be kind of more limited. They're more limited in function. If you already have a really good athletic base, then sure, calisthenics are great. Like Mike Tyson's calisthenics programs from back in his prime are absolutely nuts. I just read a thing on Wild Hunt Conditioning about it. 500 dips in the morning. Just you got to go read it. It's crazy. But a lot of this stuff is oftentimes associated with things like prison workouts or fighter workouts or whatever, because they're specifically adapting to their sport. And they're doing their sport training, which is fighting. And they're doing the calisthenics to support that. Is it always the best idea? No, but it's an idea that can work very well almost everywhere. Like you can just drop down and do 500 push-ups almost everywhere. You do it in the airport, you can do it any place you can put your hands on the floor. So maybe not the horse barn. But it's not that calisthenics are bad. It's just that they're limited in their scope. And I tend to lead people towards things that are more controllable for the output that they have. If you're deconditioned and you go into a calisthenics program, the odds that it's going to make you incredibly good are limited. There's a lot of calisthenics have a high fail rate unless you have a lot of time and nobody cares about your longevity. Kind of a weird way to say it. Is that accurate? I think that's accurate. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with calisthenics. There's just better ways to do things in shorter periods of time, especially for deconditioned people. No skills. Interesting question. Hello, Mark. Is double kettlebell training with 224s enough to be the most fit man in my town? I would only train the basic kettlebell movements and body weight training, like pull-ups and dips. Sure, absolutely. I mean, it depends on what town you live in. If you live in Leadville, Colorado, maybe not, because Leadville, Colorado is at what, 10,000 feet, and they'd run a 100-mile race there. So maybe not there, but like in a normal town, sure. Double 24s is heavy. Double 24s is a lot of load. Just learn to not put it down. People always say like, oh, double 24s, kettlebells aren't heavy, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, anybody just go pick up double 24s and do long cycle for 10 minutes. Give me 130 reps in 10 minutes and you will be an absolute monster. Or will you be extraordinarily fit? Absolutely. If you want to be more fit, you could go faster or you could do longer. There are guys who are doing like marathoning with long cycle with weights like that, like double 24s. It's absolutely bonkers. I saw a thing. God, who is this guy? I saw this guy. The guy was a monster. I think he was doing double 32s or something for 30 minutes of long cycle. I was like, that is not human. I don't know who that guy is. Like, what is going on with that guy inside of his body? Internally, it's crazy. So yeah, is double 24s enough to be the most fit guy in your town? Sure. Just learn not to put them down and do all your pull-ups and your dips. Sure, you'd be in fantastic shape doing that. Fantastic shape. Will you be the strongest guy in your town? Not if it's a town full of powerlifters. Will you be able to lift longer than any powerlifter? Absolutely. The question is, what do you mean by fit? That's always the question that I ask people. What do you mean by fit? It's always such a loaded question. Will you be as fit as a marathon runner? Not unless you run. Not unless you're good at marathoning. Are you going to be as fit as a cyclist who goes out and does 100 miles at a time? No, you're not going to. Everything is specific. I think something like double kettlebell training is your best possible option for general physical preparedness, which then allows you to adapt to other things, types of fitness that you want to do. But double kettlebelling is essentially the endurance version of Olympic weightlifting. And learning, you're just, instead of doing one clean and jerk, you're doing clean and jerk for 10 minutes. Instead of max load, it's pick up these weights and see who can go the fastest for 10 minutes. So it just all depends on what you mean by fit. But I think so. I think kettlebell guys have the best general physical preparedness of any other modality. Guys who do competition stuff, so in the beginning we do hard style stuff because it's easiest to learn fastest. And after years of doing hard style stuff, then we lead people towards competition style where they can start to refine that. In the beginning, hard style, add movement patterns and complexity and your ability to change your breathing quickly. In advanced stuff, we tend to go back and we restrict movement patterns, but we go for longer periods of time. So fitness is just a question. What do you need to be fit for? I do think kettlebells are the best thing for general physical preparedness in association with something like clubs. I think that there's nothing better than that. Simon Chill, back to the topic of eggs. Eggs sold in the UK are free range. So there is a difference between free range and like out wild. So there are chickens raised in cages that live their whole life in cages. Those are the worst eggs. Those are the cheapest eggs. Then you have chickens that are running around inside of a barn. And that could be considered free range depending on the laws on verbiage on where you are. Where they just shove one chicken, they do the math, and it's one chicken per every 1 square foot or something, and they shove them in a barn, and they end up eating each other and turning into monsters. And then there's that type of free range, which is slightly better. They move more they eat each other. I don't know, chickens are monsters. And then you have like chickens who have access to the outside, and then you have chickens who eat a completely natural diet. This is kind of how I break down like the quality of eggs. It's very, very hard to get the last. Free range is usually the best one you can get, or usually free range that is fed something with like omega fatty 3 acids in it. That tends to make the eggs even better. But like, it's almost, I don't know, I only know one person who does it. My dad has actual free range live wild chickens, that don't get fed. They get put out and they hunt and they murder their own food. And those eggs are different. And it's incredible. You wouldn't think so. You see like good eggs and they have like a very blonde, light colored yolk. And then as the egg gets better, the yolk gets darker and darker. With the chickens who eat wild diet, the yolk is so dark it doesn't even qualify as yellow. It's almost like red. It's crazy. We evolved out of the sea long before the field. Okay, Lesterfield, I'll take that. Yeah, if you want to go back 4 billion years, sure, we evolved out of the sea, but so did everything else on the planet. What we're thinking of is like the evolution of mankind being the last million years, humans being anatomically as we are for at least the last 200,000, but that line keeps getting pushed back all the time. But I consider, out of the sea so far back is to be like crazy. I mean, you're talking pre-dinosaur at that point. We have more in common with dinosaurs than we do with whatever crawled out of a primordial soup. Lesterfield, do I supplement with fish oil? I do not. I do not, no. I know a lot of people do that. People who live closer to the ocean or closer to water than me have fish diets, and that's absolutely fantastic. I just didn't have access to that. I am a forest field raised person. My family has never been fish people, at least not in the last 400 years. We've always been red meat and forest people. There's nothing wrong with fish. I think it's absolutely fantastic if you could get your hands on it. My friend lives up in the Yukon, in the Arctic Circle, and they subsist on red meat and fish almost entirely. Super cool diet. I would love to get up and make videos with her sometime. But they, have much better fish than we have in Ohio. I have fished and done things like that, but it's not like the fish that they're getting up there in the Yukon, which is like will actually sustain a person. Brock Brown. When doing multiple workouts a day or when exercising and working a physical job, what do you recommend for a stretching protocol? Multiple workouts a day, super fun idea. I do a mini cool down, a stretch session at the end of every small workout. So if I work out for 15 minutes, I stretch for 10 minutes. And if I do it twice a day, I stretch twice a day. If I'm working a physical job, I wake up, I work out in the morning, and I stretch before I go to work so that I'm ready for the day. And then usually I don't end up stretching after a 14-hour day on set or like in a field or anything. But that if I'm really beat up, I will put it in and come home and stretch for 10 or 20 minutes after you take that shower and you get all the grossness off. But multiple workouts a day should mean multiple cool downs a day or multiple re-lengthening of the tissues every day. Even if it's just 6 minutes and it's just extend the spine, flex the spine, has to be in there. Otherwise, you do get tight and you do get messed up. Will S. Hey, Mark, love your content. Thanks, Will. Purchased your club program and am running a general kettlebell Tetris besides it. What would Bodyweight 101 add that's different about it in regards to kettlebell and club? You're just running into a whole nother family of movement. Kettlebells and clubs are the easiest to learn, the fastest, right? I think that humans are really good. We pick things up and we carry things and we throw things. Like, I think those are the kind of the basics of what humans do. Bodyweight 101 is starting to build into a bunch of different types of get-ups. Get-ups are fundamental, whether it be a kettlebell get-up, a bodyweight get-up, a Krav get-up, a judo get-up. There's a bunch of basic ways that people get up off of the ground. So doing something like Bodyweight 101 starts to lead people towards doing those things. You need to practice anything you want to be good at. So I practice kettlebells and clubs a lot, but then I practice get-ups, because anytime you do any type of martial art or sport, you need to be good at get-ups, because you're going to get knocked down somewhere along the line, and getting up off the ground quickly and efficiently is a basic human skill. So Bodyweight 101 is designed as a bridge program to Krav 1, which should be coming out hopefully next week, if I can finish the edit. And then it will start to build towards more specific, useful versions of get-ups. Man, I'm never going to get that dust out of my head. Shop dust is killing me. No matter how much I neti pot, I just can't get it out. Terry Freer, F-R-E-I-R, Freer, Terry Freer. Do you have any knowledge about rehabilitation after stroke? I am 11 months post-stroke and have made a great recovery, looking to try to add club bells to regain my throwing patterns. Yes, I do have knowledge of rehabilitation after stroke. There are entire systems of training designed around this. Certain things called like Brain Gym is a very advanced system. There's also a system of Z Health. The most important thing that we're doing when doing something like rehabilitation from stroke is crossing the center line. Everything in kettlebells, clubs, and mace will help you recover from stroke. Clubs and mace are better than kettlebell because they cross the center line straight laterally. Everything that you do with kettlebells and clubs, or that with clubs and mace, is essentially stroke rehab if you start at a light enough weight and you do it in a repeatable order. So like all of my club programs are all a series of movements repeated and then repeated by round, so that there's at least 4 learning opportunities per workout. And then you're supposed to do each level at least 6 times. And then depending on which program you're doing, it's 3 to 7 levels. And then you come back and you repeat it with a slightly heavier weight. So if you were to repeat just say level 1 with 3 weights, bare minimum, 15, 20, 25. But if you're recovering from stroke, you're going to want to start way lighter than that. You're going to be down in the like maybe 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, 20, 22.5, 25. How many was that? You would repeat level 1 6 times for each one of those weights. So you would end up repeating it like 24 times. And then you would end up, it's more than that. But then for learning opportunities per workout, you're going to end up with hundreds of opportunities to work on those little movement patterns that you have lost with stroke. And you're allowing your brain that chance to remap stuff. So all the stuff I write is secretly, not so secretly, rehab for neurological damage of some type. So I'm always trying to design things that way. They should be prehab, they should be rehab, they should be neurological, they should improve movement patterns. If you have any type of traumatic brain injury, then all of my programs are designed to deal with that. And then you're supposed to repeat them in a specific order in order to give your brain the greatest number of opportunities to rebuild those connections that may have been damaged from something like stroke or from traumatic brain injury. So yes, there's a lot of stuff that you can do for rehabilitation after stroke. Weight swinging across the center line is the most useful thing that I could say to you in the shortest possible sentence. There are a bunch of other things that are variations in a logical progression of weight swinging across the center line. There's also a lot that's done with quadruped movement. reestablishing crawling patterns. So cat crawls, bear crawls, forward crawls, back and forth. But oftentimes that stuff is done with some type of neurotherapist. But, cross-body crawling and reestablishing those patterns, because it goes back to the way that you originally learned when you were a baby. When you were a baby, you laid on your back and then you rolled to the side, and then you rolled to the side and you figured out how to sit up. And then you go into the crawling position, and babies learn to crawl first. And then from crawling, they figure out how to get their feet underneath them. They push back, they drive up into a rock bottom squat, and then they work on standing. So you're going to, rehabilitation from stroke is all of that stuff. It's swinging weight across center line, it's reestablishing crawling patterns, and then it's reestablishing squat patterns. And you're basically recreating the learning process all over again to remap parts of the brain. I think I said that generally correct. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I said that generally correct. John Doe, I have one 24K kettlebell that I swing one-handed but can't press. What kettlebell should I buy next? Buy something you can press. Buy an adjustable competition kettlebell, and then you'll have all of them, and you can work on your presses. If you just do swings, it's great. You're better off than not doing anything, but you would like to do your presses because they force you into a full standing posture, and they stack all your joints up. So pressing is important. I would tell you to get lighter weights so you can work on your presses, your Turkish get-ups, and your snatches. And then go back and get a heavier weight and work on your swings again. But if you can't do a press, then you need to be... The goal is to be equally good at all the 6 basic moves of kettlebelling with a weight. So you need to find a weight where you can clean and you can start to press. Or even if you have a 24K, you need to swing. You need to swing to a clean, and then you need to work on your push press. There, you can certainly push press 24K to get the lockout. Hold it for a couple seconds, come down, change hands. You can do sets of 1, but you have to work on the press. So I would say go down in weight so you feel more comfortable working on the press so that you can get to the point where you can press your 24K. Mark Bradley sending a thank you note. He learned everything he knows about kettlebells from the channel. At this moment, he's 20 kilograms lighter. Boom. 20 kilograms. 20 kilograms is 44 pounds. That is not an insubstantial weight loss, Mark Bradley. Congratulations. The goal is, for me, is just to make educational videos. If people have access to good information, I think society will get better instead of worse. So if I can make as many free, I'm going to keep making free videos as long as I can stand it economically, to keep spreading word, knowledge. The more people have knowledge of how to write their own programs, the better the world can get. If people once again have control of their health, of all of the equipment they need to maintain the health, they can write an infinite number of programs and they can work out forever. Society will get better. Then we all need to go back to learning to grow our own food and to cook and prepare our own food and store our own food, because I think fitness and food security are the foundation of civilization. And if we don't know how to keep ourselves healthy and we don't know how to keep ourselves fed, then I think we run at a low level of agita. Agita, is that the word? Agita? I think the word is agita. Yeah, is that a hippie word? Is that a Burning Man word? I don't know. We run at a low level of agita or annoyance, or agita is slightly different of a word. It's like paranoia and scared at a super low level all the time. And I think that people have that because their brain subtly knows that they're not prepared to survive. And they know, their brain knows that they're not fully in control of their situation. Therefore, it's always running on a weird loop. So I think more education is good. I'm going to keep making as many videos as possible so people like you can take control of their own health and start living a better life. The goal of all of this is just to get people to do more adventure stuff, because I want people to go on adventures with me. And if I can trick the whole world into just doing adventure stuff, then when I go places on adventures, there will be other people having adventures, and the whole world will get better. So be in control of your fitness, be in control of the equipment related to your fitness, be in control of your program design or understanding how to do it, then be in control of knowing how to prepare your own food, then grow your own food, then store your own food, and then personal defense. People need to understand the movement patterns associated with keeping themselves alive, whether it be weapons fighting, basic martial art techniques, or escape and evasion. Yeah, God, we get nerdy on this channel. Jesus. Thank you, Mark. Doyle, thank you very much for the compliment. Try not to repeat too many positive things about myself. It just becomes me reading compliments, which I don't like to do. Amol Ahire, how to avoid forearm golfer's elbow while doing kettlebell workouts. Two things. You have to actually cool down your elbows at the end of your workout and your forearms. So that means, we had talked about this earlier, that means seal stretches. That means locust stretches. There are several videos from that. I think it's like 13, 14, 15 in the cool down series. I may be wrong. Don't quote me. You need to make sure you can actually straighten out your arm all the way. And then the other thing is to do single arm club, because single arm club induces a bunch of different types of rotation in the elbow. And probably one of them can be heavy and one of them can be light. It's very hard. It takes people years to be able to do both heavy kettlebell and heavy club at the same time without trashing themselves. But cooling down and re-lengthening the elbows for a minimum of 2 minutes on each elbow after workout is a must. Renee Young, respectfully must disagree with your red meat. Okay, I don't care. Love your content regardless. You've gotten back in amazing shape. Well, very good. I'm happy that you are feeling better, Renee Young. And people don't have to agree with me. That's fine. I have a bunch of weird theories about how and why the body works from years of reading way too many books. A lot of my theories on red meat specifically come from Native American culture and eating practices, especially there are entirely red meat eating tribes that existed for years in North America. All of the plains people were not farmers at all, right? All the plains tribes lived almost exclusively on buffalo. Everything about buffalo, and the buffalo herds would come through, and before horses, they had buffalo jumps where they would drive buffalo off of cliffs in mass. So the buffalo would kill themselves, and they would go down and harvest all the meat. And then they would package that meat, and then they would dry it and store it and make things like pemmican. And then they would subsist on that for most of the year. Without farming, the majority of their diet was red meat. Eastern tribes did farm extensively, but they also subsisted largely on red meat. My friend, First Nations up in the Yukon, they subsist almost exclusively on red meat and fish. So there are a lot of different theories about meat, and meat has become less PC over time or whatever. It doesn't mean it's less true. I think that large-scale farming practices are monocropping is very, very not good for the world. So I think that herds of animals roaming a wild landscape is a substantially better long-term strategy for the earth. There's a great TED talk about the guy who killed all the elephants in Africa because he thought that they were beating up the land, and the land got worse, not better. And the guy lives with the horror every day of like the idea that reducing herding animals did not improve the environment. It actually made it substantially worse. So I think that humanity needs to move forward and back at the same time and go back to large-scale open-range herding techniques. Like that's one of the things that's going to save the Arctic and the permafrost. As permafrost melts, it releases tons of CO2 and traps CO2 into the atmosphere. The way that you counteract that is by putting a million buffalo up there and having them move across the permafrost and eat it. And as they're up there in large herds, they will return it into grassland as it was in ages past. So people can argue with me about red meat all they want. That's fine. We can always have debates on any topic. I am just a big believer in red meat and in the health of the earth being related to large-scale herding techniques. But that's me, and I'm a nerd. Witold Dudzinski. Witold Dudzinski. You should check out Jordan Peterson and his red meat diet. I am familiar with him and his red meat diet and how him and his daughter Michaela Peterson, had very bad health issues and immune issues, and then went on entire red meat diets and basically solved their health problems through it. Totally believe it. I also follow Dr. Sean Baker, who is a big advocate of red meat diets. I've been an advocate of red meat my entire life, just from the historical things of like the Mongols. What did they eat? Red meat. What did the natives all over North America eat? Red meat. For the most part, it's only societies that get much more urbanized that move away from red meat. But there are many, many instances of tribes all the way around the world in every environment subsisting entirely on red meat. There's a tribe in Africa which subsists entirely on red meat and milk. And that's it. So this has been an interesting one, guys. We've got a little rough start. Sorry for my constant sneezing. Once I talk a lot, I get out all the shop dust out of my face. But I'm going to be blowing my nose for the next 3 days at least. And then it gets worse because I get on motorcycles and ride through the desert, and it's very dusty out there. So thank you guys for putting up with me and my gross sounding breathing right now. I appreciate it. What do we have coming up? We should have our Krav. I just have to finish the PDF for the Krav Get Up program. Everything else is ready to go. And then that program will come out. And I'm trying to work on finishing our Turkish Get Up Mastery program the second week of August so that we could have that program out coming up by the end of August, I hope. It's a lot of videos. There are 35 explainer videos that I need to shoot for that program, which is a ton. I've already done a rough edit on the follow-alongs for all the programs, and then I need to do about 14 introduction and explainer videos for that whole thing. So that's what's coming up on my work schedule. We are going to continue to work on our basic kettlebell instruction series for a while. It's kind of nice to go back and start over at the beginning and just do it the way that I used to do it in studio all the time. Every time somebody came into the studio, we would start with deadlift and then go to swing. And then we would just go through a whole series of progressions. And then that usually went through a couple of weeks, and then we would determine where we wanted to go after that. So we're going to be working on that video series for a while. I know it's very basic for a lot of people, but that's the goal. My goal is really to help the most people learn the basics in the best way. So if you guys have any more other ideas for good series of videos, I would always appreciate help coming up with things that people think that I should be working on, so I can sit down and start to plan that out and try to make it and do it properly. Flood, greetings from evil Russia. The Russians did create the best systems of training, the cheapest, most effective for the greatest number of people systems in training in all of human history. Also, they invented the AK-47, which might be the simplest, most elegant piece of machine engineering ever in all of human history. And those things, kettlebells and AK-47s, will be around for 1,000 years. Russia has done a lot of interesting engineering in a lot of weird ways. So, hello from evil Russia. Hello, evil Russia. Let's do one more question here because these diet ones are a bit fun. Rocky, I'm not sure if our native diet was the same as the European diet or if it was always suitable for those of European descent. Native diet, are you a First Nations or North American native? You have to define native for me, Rocky. Yeah, European native diet was very similar to the Native American native diet. If you go back 5,000 years, the European native diet was almost exactly the same as the native diet when Europeans first got here in the 1600s. And there's plenty of evidence for that, specifically in there's a whole series of dietary articles I read on that, on like what foods and plants that they were eating 5 to 10,000 years ago in Europe. It's almost exactly the same. It's heavy on meat. It's heavy on meat. Last question, Stephen K. Do you cold plunge, Mark? I do if I have access to a cold plunge. I actually do. I love to hate cold plunge. Cold plunge is one of those things that if you could do it all the time, it would be incredibly good for you. It's just very hard to find somebody with a cold plunge. One of my clients built a cold plunge into his house at my insistence because he put in a sauna, and I was like, you got to put in a cold plunge right next to it. But I haven't seen that client in like 2 years, so I haven't been cold plunging in a long time. But I would love to get a place to put a cold plunge again. My buddy Cody Story used to have an awesome cold plunge at his gym in Mid-City, and he had taken like a giant coffin refrigerator and scrubbed it all out and cleaned it, and then put extra insulation around the outside of it, like 6 inches, wrapped the whole thing in wood, filled it with purified water, and then put it on a timer. So it would go on for like 1 hour every like 2 or 3 days. They had it timed out. And so after you would work out at his gym, you would go out back, and it had like the Korean style shower thing with a little bucket and a stool, and you would just scrub off, dump the bucket over your head to get all the sweat and grossness off your body, and then you would get in the cold plunge, and you would open it up, break through the top layer of ice, and get into it. That was the greatest cold plunge ever, and I don't know why more people don't have those. If they had those, I keep trying to get Gambate Fitness to put one in, but they keep telling me no. So I love cold plunge. It's just hard to do if you don't have a cold plunge or an ice river or something like that close by. Steve from New Brunswick, from East New Brunswick. I'm not sure what that comment is. I'll come back to it, guys. All right, guys, we've been here for 102 minutes. Had a bit of a rough start today, but let's come back next week. We'll try to be more on schedule next week. I apologize for jumping around times today, helping friends with projects. You know, it just moves around a lot. I'm on their schedule because it's on a filming schedule, so I'm working around their schedule. They're not working around me at all, but that's how it happens in the film world. You have to adapt. So everybody have a good day. Continue to train. Send me lots of questions. Write comments after this video, and anything you think I should know, let me know.